Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kashawn Hopkins. I'm an instructional technology specialist from Oklahoma Public School Resource Center. And today I'm going to be talking about the ISTE Standards for Education Leaders. So some fun stuff. I'm excited about this one in particular because if you've seen any of the other ones that I've done before this one, I've already talked about the ISTE Standards for students and teachers. But I felt like I had to do this one, and personally, because I feel like it's a bit of a challenge for me, for my background. I've been in education as a teacher, and I kind of understand that perspective of teaching and students. But I feel like there was a lot of growth potential for me here, trying to dive in and figure out what would be useful for educational leaders. So I want to get more into that in a minute, but I'm going to let my colleague introduce himself. He's with us today.
Hello, I'm Kurt Bernhardt. I'm Director of Technology for OPSRC, and Kashawn and I make up the tech team here. So if you have any tech questions or tech needs, just let us know.
Yeah, and you can do that through techteam@opsrc.net, right up there on the screen. Best way to get us, I think. Additionally, I have slides, a link to the slides on here. I'm going to copy this and also read it out loud since it is case sensitive. So lowercase t period LY/3, capital R, capital S, capital O. You can do next to these slides. I highly recommend that you do because they're filled with all sorts of resources. I feel like this one probably a little more than before, just because of the dense nature of all of these standards and how far you can get into them. As I was doing the research for them, I really feel like each one of these standards could possibly be its own little tech talk. There's so much to unpack here, despite there being less standards compared to the other ones. So yeah, that's the preliminary stuff out of the way. Just in case you've never seen them before, let's take a look. I have a link to them as well, but you can also get to them through the ISTE.org, ISTE.org website. You can get to the standards here. So let's pop on over there, see what we're working with today. So if you're on the ISTE website, if you hover over standards, you should see the other groups of standards there, one for students, educators. There's also coaches, which I'm thinking about jumping into. But I wanted to at least get the main three, the ones that have been around the longest and have been through, I believe this is the third iteration. So third edition here. These used to be called the ISTE Standards for Administrators, but I like that they've included, they've switched this a little bit to be educational leaders. So I think this still applies to educators who are kind of like in leadership positions and not just limited to administrators, but definitely still just as applicable as it was before in its previous editions here. So just so we can take a look, we have the main standards here. Equity and citizenship advocate, visionary planner, empowering leader, systems designer, and connected learner. And then you can click on each individual standard to see substandards here. And you can take any one of these standards or substandards on here and really take these to push your school in certain directions. Not just school, kind of the scalability of these standards allow you to, pursue technology goals, even on a district level or even on a state level. We've adopted these in all 50 states in the United States in here. So there are resources out for all of these things, but I just wanted us to be aware what we're going to dive in here. But before I get too far into this, first of all, just a little quick schedule, just to keep it clear where we're going and how we're moving through this particular tech talk. This one will be a little longer than my usual one, usually about a 30-minute slot here. I'm going to extend it just a little bit, 45 minutes, because I'm going to do a deep dive on each one of these standards here and try to give recommendations for each. So we've already been through the introduction. I'm going to wrap things up with that, with the objective there. Then I will talk very broadly about the ISTE standards, just in case this happens to be your first one on here. I wanted to at least put an argument for them, give an idea of what they are and how they can be used. Then I go a little bit deeper there. I want to talk just kind of broadly about the ISTE standard for educational leaders, give a few arguments for that, just trying to give a little bit of perspective on it. And then the meat of what we're going to jump into is I'm going to break down each standard the best I can. This is kind of a surface level type of discussion that I want to try to open up on this, and just kind of showing you what what different options that you have out there in terms of taking these standards and how to pursue them and how to go about them. And then I'll finish up by just kind of wrapping things up. I have some resources to share with you. I've put at the end, and I feel like I put a little bit extra oomph into this one just because of since my experience, my professional experience isn't as limited and isn't as I don't have as much professional experience as being an educational leader. I've never really been in that position. I've tried to look and see what the research says more so than ever on this. So lots of resources that I think you can take advantage of. But yeah, that's where I want to jump into, and let's get started. First of all, my objective here: after this training, educators will be able to apply the ISTE standards for educational leaders to integrate technology in their school district. So at the end of the day, it's all about being able to get that technology into your classrooms in a meaningful way that not only supports teachers. I feel like this is kind of the main idea that I have here, but it not only supports teachers, but also enables these kind of transformative learning experiences that I've been talking about in the previous tech talks that I've done here. So first of all, if you've never been exposed to these standards before, the definition that I got from the ISTE organization says that they're a high impact, sustainable, scalable, and equitable learning experience for all learners. So just to break a few of those pieces out there, I did talk a little bit about the scalability. It doesn't just work in a classroom level, but also in a school-wide level, district level, state level, however way that you want to use these. They've been gone through several editions. So it's real easy to use it in a bunch of different scenarios. And the language that's being used, you'll see a lot of repeated terminology that's used from standard to standard or substandard to substandard, even from group to group, that allows you to have these conversations about technology in a way that people can understand. So I really love that. It's kind of one of the really nice things about the standards, that they try to use the language. And if they do use something that's technical, they try to define it right there and there. Right here and there in the standards, but for the most part, it's put kind of like in a plain language style. So, you know, students could talk about it, parents could talk about it, teachers, educators, administrators, all that. And a good part of this, in fact, the very first standard when it comes to, I think this is the only set that does this, but the very first standard talks about equity. It's all about making sure that you're not only just using the technology that's out there, but you're making sure that people have access to it. Yeah, cool. The next little bit here is just a little bit about the reputation about ISTEs. I've already talked a little bit about it, but it's been around for 20 years. It's been through several editions, try to just refine it and make it that much more easier for people to use. It's adopted in all 50 states right now. So you could get resources from your state department if you haven't used it already. And this kind of refers a little bit to the different groups that we have here. And I feel like all of these different groups of standards work together pretty interdependently. So yeah, that's just a little bit about ISTE standards. If you want more, there's a full article down here on the bottom left-hand corner. If I try to refer to something, I usually try to have the resource right there on the bottom left-hand corner, or it will be included in my resource pages at the end of these slides here. So you can always have access to that. All right. So a little bit on why I think the ISTE standards for educational leaders is so important, I think, and it's part of the reason why it initially pushed me to do a deep dive on these standards. The way that I kind of envision it is that the way educational leaders are in such a central position, they have kind of a bird's eye view. They see the way that the school works on a holistic level, and the thing that I feel like is because of their position, their strength is making connections from one space to another, be it partnerships or between classrooms, between educators in the same subject level between, parent, student, teacher, just trying to make all of these connections work. So I was thinking of it kind of like how power lines can transfer power from one space to another where connections wouldn't have been possible without them. So that's the way that I see these different standards is just ways that you can make connections. And, you can carry power to places that wouldn't have had it initially. And that's kind of the power behind, being someone who's technologically literate and trying to model those good behaviors that are being suggested by these standards, is that you're bringing power to these different areas. So a couple points that I want to make over here, just as a little bit about our argument, hopefully at least to get you interested in these standards before we jump into them. One of which is that it empowers stakeholders. And whenever I use the word stakeholders, I mean like everybody that's involved in the educational ecosystem. So students, teachers, parents, community leaders, anybody that's involved, or everybody that needs to be involved in the decision-making process. You'll see a lot of that in these standards of being a collaborative leader. And it's also being suggested in the National Education Technology Plan, which is another one of my points. I'm jumping ahead here. But the idea behind here is involving everybody in the decision-making process and the planning process and the process of executing the plan as well when it comes to technology. That way, students, they have a clear idea on how the technology is going to be used. Teachers can easily get on board. There's a little bit more buy-in. Parents, they're not like blindsided by the different decisions that are being made at school. They don't feel like they're powerless here. It's about getting everybody connected to this conversation of technology and how it can be used here. Yeah, more on that. It encourages leveraging communication and relationships. So you're in that connection position there. You're able to get these groups together under one roof and say, okay, how can we make this all work? And also all of these ISTE standard groups align with the US National Education Technology Plan. In fact, I refer to a couple of these places as a resource. There's a whole section dedicated to leadership as well. And one of the other standards has to do with infrastructure, which I'll do a little bit of talk on that as well. But you can get a lot of really great ideas and recommendations and see how things actually work in case studies through this technology plan. So I'm gonna pull this up so I can refer to it a little bit later. But if you click on that little link there, or you could go to tech.ed.gov, you can also find your way over here. Right now we're at the 2017 version of this technology plan, but soon there should be a 2021 plan. Fingers crossed it gets down at the end of the year. But if you click on download, you'll get this lovely 111-page document. So if you're down for reading that whole thing, awesome. There's tons of really great stuff. If you want to pick and choose a little bit here, if it seems a little bit unwieldy, there is a section 3, which is dedicated to leadership, that I think is fantastic. There's also section 5, which is dedicated to infrastructure on there, that I will come back and talk a little bit, but I feel like at least those two have some really great immediate applications. But also, if you want to refer this as a resource to others, there's a section on learning and teaching that I think is great for educators. And there is also a section about assessment as well, just different ways to take a look at just different things to think about when it comes to integrating technology and making choices about it. All right, so that's the setup. The rest of the time that I want to use here is just taking a look at each individual standard, seeing it as itself, and also how it connects to the other standards. Not just that, but how does it connect to the other two groups that I've talked about, educators and students as well. Because at the end of the line, those are the two groups that are going to be using this technology here. It's probably going to get the most value, but everybody, of course, can get value out of this, regardless who you are as a stakeholder in your educational system. So yeah, let's jump into each one of them and dissect them, and hopefully I'll try to give you some recommendations. But as I go through this, I do challenge you to kind of figure out where you're at, try to determine out of these standards, where does it place you? Do you think that it's something that you could use a lot of? Is this a place for a lot of growth you want to focus on, or is this something that you feel like is a strength, something that you can lean on and use? Like, because kind of depending on where you're at in your career, your professional growth, and just, you know, your personality, you might be better at some of these things and not as good as the other things. You might need to work with other educational leaders to really fill out the rest of these. So I don't recommend trying to do all these standards and try to get better at all of them. It's all about just kind of like taking them a piece at a time and seeing how you can approach this and build your growth personally. So that way you can push that the benefits down to students and teachers and all other stakeholders there. But yeah, let's jump in. First of all, it's equity and citizenship advocate. So a little bit of a breakdown how I do some of these, because a lot of them are, I've reused kind of the same structure to make it a little bit easier to follow. But the first thing I try to cover is a description, which is a little bit of a paraphrased version of the one that's on the actual standards themselves. You can see that there's a nice single line over here. I try to give it a little bit a description on there. So this one in particular would be to increase equity, inclusion, and digital citizenship. So those three right there. So I tried to focus on those ideas there. Next, I took the sub-standards in there. So if you click on the standard, it'll open up and you can see these different standards inside over here. So these are little bite-sized pieces that you can pursue to kind of get this overall idea of being an equity and citizenship advocate here. So I try to pull specific keywords that I think paint a fuller picture of these substandards here. So things like pursuing access. Does your students, do they have access to things like, you know, a stable internet inside and outside of the classroom? How are they getting, well, no better word, access. How are they getting access to all this? Do they have a device that they can use that is up to date, that'll work whenever they try to upload, use a program, something like that. Next keyword, modeling. I think a good chunk of making some of these standards work and making technology work in general is being somebody that not only advocates for technology use, but you know, they don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk. They actually use technology to do meetings, to take notes. They take pictures, they send it out, they maybe put it on a website or something like that. Like the more that other people see you use the technology, the more I feel like it's going to be a buy-in. It's just kind of like a culture. It's like, this is just what we do. Technology is just what happens in our schools. And so I'm willing to use it. I think people are having a little bit more buy-in on them using it as well. And lastly, using technology to make social change. And all of this, I believe, ties in together here, especially like in trying to increase that access. It's going to be so huge to have for students to have spaces to know that they're going to have kind of like a good quality education, just because of the fact that, you know, they have highly trained teachers and they're in a space where, you know, they have good internet, they have good devices there. So yeah, that's the way that I kind of interpret this standard here. I think there's a lot of ways to look at this, but these are a couple of things that I'm pulling from the standards themselves. Lastly, the thing I try to give for each one of these standards, some resources. If this is something that you're like, all right, this is something that I want to pursue, or this is something I'm already pursuing, what are some different ways that I can incorporate, that I can get a little bit deeper, get a little bit further, try to do a little bit more applications here. I do recommend these resources here. First of all, of course, I've already recommended the National Education Technology Plan. Page 42 is where the leadership section starts on that. The thing I think I want to highlight for that, that I think is pretty good. So what did I say, 42? If you download the PDF, the pages are perfect. I think they're a little bit off if you try to just do it from the browser here. But let me go to, I think I'll get close. Yes. actually as you go through the actual, let me try to zoom in a little bit more, section there, they have these little sections in blue, which are case studies, or they refer to an organization that's already kind of doing work in that specific section that they're talking about. I think these are good pieces to read. Even if if you're really busy, if you can just set aside like 5 minutes to take a look at one case study, I think this will generate some really great ideas. They also talk about budgeting in here, which I think is fantastic. And at the end of every section, in fact, they do this, but I think these are good here. They give you some tangible recommendations that I think are worth taking a look at, especially if you don't know where to start. I think this is a good kind of like grounded way to take a look and have something actionable after the things that you've read through here. So that's one recommendation. Next one is if you're talking about how to do digital citizenship, because that's a part of being a citizenship equity advocate there. There is an implementation guide given by Common Sense that I think is really great. It talks about a little bit of a 3-step process here on things you can do, ways you can plan, ways to implement, train up educators, teach students, try to engage everybody in this kind of decision-making process of being a good digital citizenship, and trying to really figure out, okay, once we've implemented this plan here, how do we make sure that we're getting what we want by engaging in this process? And so, yeah, you walk yourself through this process here. You start by clicking on where it says make your plan. And it's, you know, whenever you're doing any of these kind of frameworks, it's not like a one size fits all type of deal. It's something that, you know, you're going to have to engage stakeholders at the get-go of the planning stages of doing doing something like this, just because of like, you want to try to, you know, God, what's the word? Adapt. You want to try to adapt this framework, this approach to the unique needs of your school here or your district, however way that you want to implement this. So yeah, I think this is worth taking a look at. Yeah, if this is something that you're interested in. And then finally, something about equity. I wanted to make sure that I have that more so than ever. I feel like this piece is important. It was important before, but now that we live in kind of a world, when this was recorded, this might be different somewhere along the lines, who knows? But this is recorded in November 11th, 2021, where we're trying to still figure out remote learning. We're still worried about you know, making sure everybody stays safe. And in all of that, it's so easy, more easier than ever, I think, to overlook students and overlook their needs, their social needs, their emotional needs. And not just students might get overlooked. There might be teachers out there as well, just kind of really struggling, trying to make sure and get everything to work. And so I think this little piece, it's the full, I don't have the full name here, but the equity lessons in a time of COVID-19 is really good to take a look at. This was created by All4Ed. And the thing that really set this piece of resource apart from the other things that I've seen that are like it is the fact that it was created by 12 different organizations, kind of coming together and building a little repository of resources here. So if you go to this link, click on download, you'll get taken to this article here. You can see the different organizations up there if you want to learn more about them, but if you scroll through here, you'll have different resources. So this is just getting you an idea of like different perspectives on, you know, what's these students, these schools have learned. So you can kind of combine it together with your experience and see what resources are out there to help out. So there's a section for reopening schools. There's a section on remote instruction. There's a section on creating a safe learning environment for systematically neglected students. Meeting student social, emotional, academic needs. You can see that each one of these sections has like a huge list of resources and ideas that come from these different organizations here. Advancing teacher leadership, trying to empower them, supporting students with disability, supporting English language learners. So homelessness, equity, measuring student learning. So there is so many goodies in here that I feel like is worth taking a look at. And this is up to date. Like this was published October 2021. So there's some real goodies in here that I think is worth looking at. Okay, I'm going to wrap this section up because I can't spend all day on it. But if it's something that you want to do more talks on, shoot us an email, techteam@opsrc.net. Each one of these things, like I said, could be its own little tech talk. So, and I feel like I've only really hit the surface on any one of these standards here. So I would love to have a conversation with anybody on any of these. But anyways, just to wrap this section up, just a little quote that I found in my research. I couldn't find who said this exactly because it was like in a video offhandedly said. So this doesn't come from me, but I just like how well this person put it. Your zip code should not dictate your educational opportunity on there. And I feel like that really sums up what this standard here is about, because being able to provide that high quality education, no matter what your situation is there. Okay, so I have about 18-ish minutes to hit the other standards, which I'm going to, but just for a moment, just in case anybody does have to leave at this point, that's totally fine because it's about the 30-minute mark-ish. I am going to show my last slide here, and I'm going to show it again at the very end as well. I highly recommend that if you want to catch the rest, either one, email us at techteam@opsrc.net, or two, go to opsrc.net/techtalks. I'm going to copy that real quick. You will see a recording and the slides that are going to be posted up there. So really great stuff on there. In fact, make sure to tune in December. We'll have some more stuff on there. Yeah, should be a good time. But with that, let's continue the dive here. And I'm going to try not to spend too much time on one single standard. I think all of these are good here. But visionary planner is the next one. A quick description of that is to create a shared vision, plan, and evaluation cycle. So a big part of this, I feel, in fact, I'm going to bold underline this piece because I feel like it's the most important part of this, is this needs to be something that comes from all of the groups that are going to be affected by this: students, parents, educators, community in there. You got to include everybody in here because this is all the people that are going to make technology work in the schools and make sure that students at the end of the day get that high quality education that I was talking about. And I've broken this down into three parts. There's the vision, the where do we want to go, pie in the sky. If you just closed your eyes and clicked your heels 3 times, where do you want your students to be in terms of how are they, where do you want your students to be and how education, how the technology is going to get them to that vision there. So that's where the second part comes in the plan, because that's, okay, now that we have this vision, how are we going to get there? What's the nuts and bolts of that happening? And then the evaluation cycle is, all right, now that we've done a bit of the plan here, how do we make sure that the plan worked on here? And this is something that you all want to do before you even start doing things like purchasing technology, putting it in there. Because if and this is just me talking as an educator in the classroom, if technology is just thrown in there, then it's really up to the teacher in a way. And then you can get these different versions of what technology looks like, because it's all filtered through the teacher's own ideas and attitudes and their experience with technology in there. And sometimes that's great if teachers are already comfortable with that. But sometimes, it can, you'll have a bunch of technology that's collecting dust in a room somewhere or in the corner of the classroom. But having the shared vision, plan, and evaluation cycle says, like, this is the culture that we want to have, and this is how we want to use these things. So keywords that I pulled from this would be collaborative. And like I said, for educational leaders, you're in that unique position to make those connections, to create that space and saying, okay, we're going to work together on this one. It's going to be a little bit sloppy. It's going to be hard to fit everybody's needs, but it's work that's worth doing on here, that I feel is personally worth doing. Next, measure. We want to make data-driven decisions. We don't want to just get a piece of technology because, everybody else is doing it, or, oh, the reviews are good. We want to know, is this technology the right fit for what we want to attempt to do with it? And this is an idea that I've repeated over and over, probably in every single one of the talks for the standards and technology integration frameworks that I've already talked about. We want to make sure that we have the right tool for the right job, is what I'm saying here. And then finally, communicate. It's all about, it ties into that collaboration, that shared vision. Everyone want to make sure that all of these groups are talking and continue to talk, not just because you've planned it. Doesn't mean you stop communicating. The whole process, the implementation, the evaluation, the going back into the vision and saying, okay, do we need to make some tweaks? These different groups need to be talking at all times, and you don't need to stop talking, because there's always a better way to do that. Okay, resources, really quick. The Future Ready Schools framework talks about vision planning and implementation plan, because how you pursue the plan also needs some thought process behind it. And so this framework, if you've never heard of it before, really nails everything that I've been talking about. This is also created by All4Ed that I showed not too long ago. This has a framework that includes all of these different sections, but most importantly, all of these sections, I think they call them gears here, has learners centered at the middle. Like every part of the decision-making process always referred to, okay, what are the students getting out of this? So regardless who you're talking about, be it a business that you're partnering with, or you're talking with parents, or you're involving teachers on here, everything is through that lens of what are the students getting out of this, and not forgetting that's why you're making all of these decisions. So if you want to get yourself started, there are resources in each one of these little gears on ways to pursue things to think about in terms of technology integration and making decisions about them. And they also have kind of a 5-step process down here. I believe if you create an account, which is free, you can get yourself started on how to make a plan, like starting with the vision, getting a plan together, executing that implementation plan, getting everybody involved in here. So if you have no earthly idea how to start, but you're like, okay, I do want to do something like this, or you've been pursuing something and it hasn't been super effective, try this approach. All of this is research-based and created with that. And there's also other groups that have used this already. So take a look at this. I think this could be worth your time. Next, I recommend taking a look at a technology integration framework. I've recommended one of them that I've grown to love so much in the past month, I think, after kind of going and looking and comparing different frameworks on here. This is the technology integration matrix. And I think the scalability of this really can apply to different groups as well when it comes to the technology standards. I think you can really combine this with the ISTE standards, and just because of the fact that it approaches the way that technology used in so many different ways and a bunch of different levels. And so I did put the framework on here. I would love to go more into it, but I have a separate tech talk for that if you want to learn more. But yeah, these frameworks make it so that you can get these measurable, targeted ideas out there, and you'll be able to set your goals, and everybody has kind of the same language that they can use, because this is all out there for free. And I know making connections is hard. And a lot of these resources that I have here aren't necessarily tool-based. It's usually some kind of framework or some kind of research that's out there. But in some of the cases, I was able to include some tools. If you aren't familiar with Zoom or Google Meet or some kind of like online conferencing tool at this point, try to get yourself as familiar as possible. Making those connections and being collaborative as possible requires you sometimes to meet the person where they're at, and these tools have been enabling that recently. So yeah, I think if you want to start being a good model, I think any conference tool that's accessible would really be useful to you. Okay, let's keep it going. Standard 3, empowering leader. The description of this is create a culture that empowers stakeholders here. And this one I feel like for some is a bit of a struggle. If you're someone that's like, if I'm making decisions and if I'm kind of like a hands-on type of deal on this one, I'm not saying there's not anything wrong with that. That sometimes that's what a school needs. It all just kind of depends on what people need here. But whenever you're empowering people, you're basically saying, I want a system to work. If a system is doing what it's supposed to be doing, it won't need me. Everybody else has this agency. Everybody else has this confidence. People's needs are being met. And really, I'm just kind of in there facilitating, supporting, trying to make, just making sure that, I'm keeping the lights on here. And so that I feel like is at the heart of this standard here is, what can I do to make sure that everybody has the tools to do what they need to do? And so, yeah, I've already touched on a couple of keywords on there. I don't think I didn't really hit diversity on here, but I really feel like this ties into needs here. Everybody has their unique needs. And sometimes those needs overlap. You want to make sure that I was about to say audience in a way, but you know your school well enough to try to fit those needs and make partnerships happen. My resources on here, take a look at the ISTE Standards for educators and students. In fact, popping it up for just a moment on here, you'll see that a lot of the language is essentially the same as your standards as well on here. We have educators, they want to be learners, leaders, citizens, collaborators, designers, facilitators, analysts on here. I've already done a breakdown of all these things. But yeah, these are the things that whenever you're making your decisions, this is what you want your educators to be doing on here. And the same thing for the students in here. You want them to be empowered learners, digital citizens, knowledge constructors, innovative designers, computational thinkers, communicators, and collaborators on here. So these are the things that they're going to be pursuing in here. So yeah, you can refer back to these standards, or you could have them refer back to it and say, okay, what are some things that we can pursue here? What are some strengths that you have? What are some weaknesses that you have? What are some things that you would like to pursue here, and go from there. Some tools I recommend that you get familiar with. So not only getting familiar with the conferencing tool is going to be useful in making connections. Your school's learning management system. If you're going to be doing remote, chances are a learning management system is going to be used to enable that, to make that happen. My recommendation is if you're using Google Classroom, I put the link there, and I also have Microsoft Teams. And I know that there's other ones out there, Schoolology, Moodle. You might be paying for Canvas, any of that stuff, but get comfortable with navigating around the learning management system, because I don't think it's just for classroom use. I think you can use a lot of those tools to create spaces for educators to make connections as well. And so being familiar with that is really going to help you and see and make decisions from people's perspective, and try to group together on that. Lastly, cloud-based drives as well. You want to be able to have a space that is easily accessible by stakeholders, to be able to share content digitally. So get familiar with one of these drives. Google Drive's great. Microsoft OneDrive, Dropbox is also a thing that's been around. So being familiar with these different tools, I feel like is going to be a good way for you to model these good behaviors and getting that buy-in like I was talking about before. Okay, quick sip. Let's knock out the last one. If you're stuck with me up to this point, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. I hope this has been worth your time, or at the very least, giving you some resources to dive into. Yeah. Let's unpack systems designer, because I feel like the way that I see it, at the very least, in my own personal experience, it might be different from where you're at. This is one of the standards that I feel is typically, this standard is delegated to like a separate thing. Like you'll hire like an IT person or a specialist or a technology person. And that's great to have somebody whose like whole thing is, okay, I'm dealing with all of these technology decisions on here. But to make some of the other standards work, like being a collaborative leader, helping everybody bring together to the conversation to build this, or even just, make sure that everybody has access. So like the equity piece on this one, you're going to have to know the way, you're going to have to know the system that is being placed into your school, the real nuts and bolts part of the things that enable technology in your school. So that is things like, does your school have great internet? If you do have great internet, do you have the right amount of access points? What are the devices like? Are they being kept up to date? Is there a system for that and managing all of those things? So yeah, quick description. build systems to maintain and update technology. Are you using an old piece of technology that's going to go out of date? Do you need to get, do you have a system in place to replace out devices when they get old? So yeah, a couple of keywords over here, substandard keywords: infrastructure, demand, security. Partnerships, I think, is a big thing on and making sure these things work, like involving your school in a consortium. That way you can lend out technology or borrow, or however way that you can make that work to maybe like get a good deal by purchasing something in bulk and sharing it amongst different groups. So this is, I know a good chunk of being a systems designer is the budgeting, the numbers aspect of this. And so I try to offer a couple of resources to help with that. First of which that I think is fantastic is Connect K-12. If you're in Oklahoma, you can take a look through this website over here and figure out what are the internet speeds of the schools in the state or in the district. And you can even see kind of how much the pricing is and see, like, I don't know, maybe this might be something that you can look at and figure out a way to cut yourself a better deal. You could say like, hey, all these schools around me are getting a good deal here. Why am I not getting the best deal on the internet there? And try to see if you can cut costs there. Or budget appropriately. There's also a Future Ready Schools article specifically about infrastructure. If you have no earthly idea how to start, where to start for infrastructure, I think this is a good read for this one. It's pretty robust and it comes with a lot of actionable items for you can do. So if I click on this, this comes from the Office of Educational Technology. I think it's a 71 page read here, but I think it is worth every section because this starts right at the top, making sure that you have high-speed internet on there, and the different paths that you can do, and the costing, how that can get funded on there. It's all through there. Getting high-speed internet, not just to your school, but all throughout your school, managing your network, and also the device part of it, and making sure that things are up to date. You considering the security, like what's the way that devices are going to be used and how are people going to be protected on here. So all sorts of recommendations on there. So this is a good thing to unpack from here if you just have no earthly idea where to start. I also included, and this is also in this Future Ready Link School article, but there's a section that is an infrastructure one pager of just key questions to ask yourself. So things like, what is the vision for learning that technology will be supporting, or which of the connectivity paths is the best for your district's needs? What are some things that you're thinking about for your bring your own device program? Or are you doing kind of like a one-to-one deal? Is that the best thing for your school? Or how are devices managed in your school? How should content filtering work? So lots of really great questions that hopefully over time you'll have answers to, or at the very least you're getting answers from different stakeholders on how these are going to be answered, but it's just things to consider. I've also included OER Commons on here. If you're thinking about budgeting, I know I'm going to admit off the top of my head, I have no earthly idea how it works exactly. But I know kind of like outside looking in how some of the budgeting works. But at the very least, I understand that if something is free, great, it's saving you money on here. And open educational resources is going to be a huge part of that. Yeah, so you can take a look at it. It's a giant digital library that you can pull things in. And so if you're doing things like even at a simple level, like replacing textbooks with open resource, high quality open source resources, you can take a look at this. It's by no means not the only place where open educational resources, but I feel like it's going to be a good place to start. All right, so that's systems designer. Let's wrap things up with connected learner on here. So quick description, you want to model and promote continuous improvement. And I've already kind of been talking about this on here. A couple of keywords, you want to be able to set goals. You want to create learning networks, so like using learning management systems to get educators connected together. And you want to encourage reflection. You want to say, okay, where are we at? Where do we want to go? How do we make those two things to connect on here? A couple of resources to help with that. There's the Consortium for School Networks. They have a program And a certification also at the end of that program as well, and a bunch of resources. So you can be a certified educational technology leader. If you want a great place to start, that's probably a good place to do it, because this consortium has been working on this for a long time and they have a lot of great resources. I've included Ed.Web on here. This is a networking website. And they do a lot of resource sharing, webinars, certificates, getting yourself connected community. This is really focusing on your growth as well. So yeah, if you are interested, take a look through this, and you can also join as a member as well. But yeah, just take a look at it. Next is parent communication. I've included two tools, I guess. Seesaw is one thing. You want to make sure that you're connecting with your parents as well. Don't forget that you want to encourage them and empower them as well. They're part of that stakeholder group that I've been talking about. And I guess I should say community as well, sort of, as well. I want to include in community communication in here. I know Seesaw already has a tool. So Seesaw is like a portfolio service on there, and it has a lot of great tools, usually for younger learners. But the thing that really makes Seesaw stand out for me is the fact that they have a part that's built in that parents can get themselves connected. There's a parent portal so they can see what's going on with their children as well. And I've also included website services. If you're a member of OPSRC, there's a nice little discount deal that we have going on with Gabbard Communications. And so if you are not using your website to communicate things to the community or parents, you're really missing out on a wonderful opportunity, because that is, when it's sort of part of your reputation in a way, like in the digital age that we live in. If someone wants to know something about your school, chances are they're going to Google it, clickety clack, look up your school, and then boom, the website is going to come up. And so whatever they see there is the impression that they're going to have about your school. And so if you've only been using your website in a very minimalistic way, maybe that is a way that you can get yourself connected to more parents, to more community members on there, because you never know who's going to visit your website. Oof. Okay, I'm going to wrap things up. I know I'm over time, but we're going to finish this up here. First, thank you so much, everybody, for listening to me talk about this stuff. It has been so fun doing the research on there. And I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for growth, and there's so many conversations that I would love to have about all of these things on here. A few recommendations, if you don't know where to start, and this all actually comes from the technology plan. I've pulled some of these. First of all, your very first step when you're starting this is create a clear, collaboratively created technology vision. Where you're going to go is going to determine everything else that's going to come from there. Next of which, probably already done this, but create funding plans. There's a couple of different ways to approach this. You can anticipate future updates, try to see, okay, what costs are coming down the line? Because chances are when you're doing a technology payment, like there's something that you want to anticipate coming in the future that it's usually not just like a one-time deal. It's always like, what updates do we need to make? What happens if devices are going to break down? Stuff like that. Take a look at open resources, see if there's something free that's out there that's readily available, and remove obsolete tools. I wish I could spend more time on this one, but I think about this on cost fallacy. Just because you've bought a piece of technology doesn't mean you absolutely have to use it. Just kind of echoing what I said before on here. You always want to find the right tool for the right job when it comes to technology. Otherwise, you're throwing it in there and just kind of hoping that it works and taking that risk. And so you might want to take a look at that when it comes to your funding plans. Next, connect with partners. Try to make sure that you're reaching out to them and seeing, like, is there a way to leverage your resources on here? And of course, at the end of the day, just kind of bookend this. You want to, whenever you're making these decisions and thinking about technology and how it's going to be used, always think, how does this support educator growth, and how does this increase student access on there? All right, let's wrap up. These 2 pages are dedicated to the links of everything that I've tried to reference, anything that I've talked about on here. You're very welcome to take a look. There's 2 pages of goodies on here that are worth looking at. And then this is my last page that I've already showed you. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to me here. I have a link to my evaluation on here. We have the email, techteam@opsrc.net. I have a link to the slides, or you could choose to go to opsrc.net/techtalks. On this page, you will have all of our future Tech Talks at the top, a little button for suggesting a future tool in the middle, and then our archived Tech Talks. I believe that puts us at 29 with this one. So super cool stuff. Really excited about that and really proud of the work that we've done here so far, and looking forward to the stuff that we're going to do. But for right now, I'm going to be quiet. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll take any questions.